And we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Way of the Truth Warrior. My name is David Whitehead. I am very happy to be streaming once again from my studio platform. And today we have some very special announcements and some information to cover with you regarding current events. A lot of things are happening. Things are moving really quickly. I'm joined by the lovely Fiona Aedgar, welcoming her back to the show to give us an analysis on the astrological timing of where we find ourselves right now. And of course, the great Michael Tsarion as well. We just wanted to have this quick little roundtable to discuss the timing of recent events with President Donald Trump taking some major action against the deep state globalist elites, whatever you want to call them, where he was signing in historic executive orders to actually rein in the censorship with social media platforms. We're going to be getting into the actual timing of this. And there was also recent announcements where he was pulling out of the World Health Organization and actually really going for the jugular when it comes to China and many of the agents that are embedded in America that are assisting the process of actually trying to dismantle America. So he's been really on a tear, and everybody's got their opinion, but we're here to look at the actual facts and the timing of this. So welcome to both of you. Michael, over to you real quick. It was actually your idea to put this together, so take it away, my friend.
Oh, thanks, David, for hosting it. Fiona and me have always been speaking, and we've been watching very closely. She's always watching, but I've been paying more attention because of the blinding, fantastic proclamations backed up by heavy-duty legality that is knocking these social media Orwellian censors for six. That's what they are. They become a censorship, an Orwellian censor, completely contrary to any, not just the American Constitution, but even common sense. And so why we want to have this program, though, is because it's not just a random thing, because he could have been doing this at any given time. He's been in for almost 4 years and elections coming up. I was hoping he was going to do something on the First Amendment, early, but that was just my wish. Strategically, he's a very strategic man. He is a Gemini. We'll be talking a lot about Gemini today, and he is a Gemini, and they do things in a quite methodical way. It's almost like sword fencers. They're very much into foiling the opponent. It doesn't mean that they write off other, cruder techniques. They're always on the table, of course, but their general normal way, their preferred way, is through wit, through patience, through repartee, and through legality. And so one has to stop and pause for a minute, because he's got a lot of enemies, even inside the alt community, which is bizarre, you'd think. But then if you've been tracking it like I have, this alt community has turned more left and socialist, and even much worse in recent years. So there's a tremendous amount of hatred. So it's good to always take time to announce his successes, so that these sort of pinkos and these detractors and naysayers, we weaken their case, isn't it? Because they're crying for things like what you just opened with. They've been crying for freedom of the press, freedom of speech. The man delivers it to them, or begins at least a very healthy process of delivering it to them. Yeah, I'm waiting to see you now, celebrate the man. Could you possibly do that? Well, no, you're too miserly, right? But the point is that Gemini figures in here very greatly, and it's only a few days into the sign of Gemini, the sun, but also the North Node. Now, we had talked about this on Enslaved with Fiona, so we wanted to recap that, a little thumbnail of that, and then move right into the chart. Fiona's actually drawn up the very chart for the days we're talking about, individual, which was fantastic to do that. But Fiona, maybe you could start with that. Just tell us about how long the sun's been in Gemini, what about the North Node, and move from that point. That would be very, very interesting.
Yeah, so the North Node, he actually picked the perfect day to sign this bill and to announce it to the world, because Mercury was making a conjunction to the North Node. So for anyone that doesn't know, the North Node is a really karmic point in the sky. It's a hypothetical point. It's not a planet. And I like to see it as a signpost from the universe, showing us where we need to go, the type of area that we need to focus on. And he picked the perfect day to sign this bill. So the sun was in Gemini, Venus retrograde is in Gemini, and Mercury is conjunct the North Node. So this is going to have some huge effects, long-term, excellent effects. My only concern is that Mercury is going to go retrograde soon. So, I mean, I'm not totally au fait with how things work in American politics, but is that bill passed, or is there something else that needs to be?
Yeah, it's a process.
It's a process. Yeah.
Technically, the Congress can contradict. But if the Congress was, just imagine hypothetically that they were going to block it, wouldn't that just tell everybody, even the dumbest person in America, that the Congress does not stand for freedom of speech? So my guess is it'll go through because, as you say, he's aware of his astrology. That's a bonus. It
Yeah.
backs up what people like me have been saying for years about these fellas, right? And so that'll help. And also, there's a different attorney general. There's a different zeitgeist in the air, and so although they're loony, right, his opponents, yeah, they might try to resist it, but in doing so, then it's on the wall. The writing is on the wall for everyone to see, you know. But you see, the thing is, it might not even need to go that far. It certainly won't even go to court with these Facebooks or Zuckerbergs trying to get them to court, because their stocks are falling as we speak right now. They may be rolled up before, or at least, that their echelon will be removed, and the social platforms may still be in existence under the same names, but they certainly will have removed all the algorithms, that have put them in the shit, and they won't be able to do any legal backlashing, is my feeling. But to answer your question, it is, yeah, he starts off a process. Executive orders are not to be laughed at. They're very serious, for the bad or for the good. This one's for the good. But obviously then, the lowlifes in Congress have to get a say. Isn't that right, David? Am I wrong?
Sorry, I was muted there. Yeah, no, that's correct. And actually, I do have the executive order here. And this is something that I noticed as soon as I was posting in excitement, because I was excited. I like seeing, even if it's an inch, I'll take it, especially in the battle that we're in. And I'm on there and I'm posting. I'm like, oh my God, this is historic. No president has ever done this. And people right away, I think probably 75% of the comments I got on my feed were people freaking out, condemning the man, saying he's an insider, calling him an Illuminati shill. He works for the Zionists in Israel. He does this. He's all that. And I'm like, whoa, focus. Have you actually read the thing? And you find out these people are grossly misinformed. They're reading something else and just
Correct.
Listening to other people. So here we go. This is the actual link. You can get it. I'll drop it in after, to the actual executive order on preventing online censorship. It was issued May 28th, 2020, as Fiona was saying. And I want you to go and actually read it line by line. I've read it 6 times, top to bottom. I've checked it out with corroborating information. And I mean, guys, you just got to think about this. What are you waiting? What do you want to do? Like, we're in a position where I was barely able to stream videos. So many other people are getting absolutely destroyed. We were seeing that social media companies were targeting specific sides of political debates, and also not just political divide, but anything that was deemed conspiratorial or alternative. Michael, you and I did a show even taking one of our local professors to task on the way that they've been trying to spread propaganda about those subjects. And here we have the only politician in the world that is actually putting legislation in place to prevent these companies, which are in America, but influence the world conversation. He's putting in the legal apparatus for the people to do something. And I think what people do is they'll say, on one hand, they'll go, well, why hasn't Trump done this sooner? Why isn't Trump doing this? Why isn't Trump doing that? And you go, well, if he started doing all of those things, then you guys would start calling him a dictator. So what he's doing is in my opinion, what he's doing is he's setting it up so that the people get to vote on this, and the people get to take action. The people get to have their voice heard. That's how the whole process was supposed to be. It's not supposed to be dictatorial in that way. That's not what an executive order is. A lot of people think that's what it is. That's not what it is. And as Michael said, if the other side goes, no, we shouldn't be stopping them from censoring people, we need to control the narrative, then I guess everybody knows who the real enemy is.
Yeah, it's how I looked at it. There are important documents, but see, when so much damage has been done since Donald Trump got in, executive order was the next thought on my mind. I'm not for them, but when so much dirt has been done before, it takes moving at the top. Imagine Alexander the Great in front of the Gordian knot. There's the guy who'd been still sitting there today trying to unlock it, and the Persians go, what a dickhead. And he pulls out his sword and he cuts right through it. Meet Donald Trump. That sword aspect, that ability, I can solve all your problems, but I do it from upstairs. I do it higher up, and then all the lower, mannequins and dolls and snowflakes and all the other stuff that infects our schools and our colleges, and the lower level stuff dries up of itself when you use this approach to go higher up. It's very strategical. It's very erudite, and rather than chasing all the slippery eels down here, he'd need 3, 4, 5 presidencies in order to do that. The man is working on a higher level. Don't forget, just in case we don't get to talk about it, him making this recent, within days we're talking about, very good inroads, liaison, with what do you want to call it, with India, changes the destiny of the world. I don't know what people are, like you said, David, they're out to lunch, they keep moving the goalpost, you can never satisfy them. There's monumental things happening in our world. Invasion of Hong Kong, ever wonder what that might lead to? That's a prelude to war, which might in itself then explain the days of lockdown now from a ration point of view. Anyone knowing in government that was coming would stockpile foods and cans and all of that. A lot of things can be explained by looking at the bigger picture. But getting back to the North Node, that is, as you say, a point in the zodiac, a very crucial one to astrologers. It's not just the normal random daily sort of conjunctions that come and go, sometimes within minutes or hours, is it? It's something much more substantial. But take us through. Did you have a chart for the actual document, signatures and announcements? Go through that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I didn't have an exact time as to when this bill was signed or when he first announced it on TV. So I can't really interpret the houses, but I can tell you what I see in the planets. The interesting thing is that the sun in Gemini is in square to Mars in Pisces. And Michael, you and I discussed this whole Mars and Pisces transit a little while ago because in many ways, the deep state and the secret enemies are being symbolized here by Mars and Pisces. Now, this is all happening during Venus retrograde, which definitely isn't a bad thing, but it will be interesting to see what happens when Venus turns direct on I think the 25th of June, because it's going through Donald Trump's 10th house of career and public reputation, and that house is how the rest of the world sees him. So all of this is happening with Venus retrograde in his 10th house. It may be solidified in June, by the end of June, all this kind of red tape that he has to jump through or this and that. By the end of June, we may be looking at its past, hopefully.
Yes.
But it's fantastic.
And when the sun comes out of Gemini towards June 22nd, is it, or July 22nd?
Yeah,
Gemini
June 21st. Yeah.
June 21st. So it's almost the summer solstice then, yeah, and which is another important point of all glory. If the man is successful, then it could be crowned with glory, as they say in the secret societies, at the summer solstice. That would be very interesting astrologically and astrotheologically. So folks, those who have been following our work really closely about the nature of symbolism, mark down the summer solstice, things like that. But it's not the only one. Isn't it true that since 1802, most of the big planets, so to speak, I think of them as archetypes, but let's not quibble about that. Jupiter, I think even Saturn, perhaps even others, they've all been in Earth signs. And it's only now, since 1800s, that they've shifted, into air signs. And it started right at 2020 December, which is when the lockdown really got conceived and started. Yeah, isn't that a bit interesting?
Yeah,
Saturn is in Aquarius, for instance.
Yeah, what you're referring to is called the Great Conjunction, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, and it only happens around once every 30 years. And yeah, you're right that it's been in Earth signs for the last 3, and we've just switched into air signs. So we actually have one of those. We have a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at the end of the year. It's going to be a crazy year. I'm really excited for it though, because it means that something very new is coming in terms of, and I don't mean all of this silly like social distancing stuff, in terms of the way that each human can interact with the other. I really think that there have been some positive outcomes of this whole virus thing, is that I think that many people have become awakened. And the conjunction is in Aquarius. Maybe this is the start of the age of Aquarius, because we had to go through some hardships first to really open everyone's eyes. But it certainly seems that way to me.
Well, let me just throw this into the mix. Sorry, Michael, but just because as you were talking, Fiona, I'm thinking, okay, here's the timing, here's the moves that are being made. I feel exactly the way you do. I've been literally getting messages from all over the world. I've said it before. I've been using Google Translate more than I've ever used it. People are ready for this kind of knowledge. They're ready for this information. They want to see the truth coming out, even the dark stuff. People are ready for it. I feel that. And right as that whole thing was starting to happen, with a mass awakening of what just happened in the last 3 months, the amount of lies we've been told, the amount of disinformation we've been getting from the media, the times they've been caught, the fact that we have numerous experts coming out to disagree with the World Health Organization people. We see Trump even making this next move of actually cutting off everything completely with the World Health Organization and really going after them in terms of their shady relationships with China and other entities. So, is it coincidence then that we see protests and riots happening in, I think it's 26 states now, or some, I don't know how many states. Somebody sent me a big list, but like there's all these states that are rising up because of this one incident that happened in Minnesota. It's catching the media, and it's trying to inflame once again the rekindling the race war, trying to divide the country right as it was starting to unify. Right as people were waking up and seeing the whole scam that was going on with this virus lockdown. And now all of a sudden, here we go. We're plummeting back into what was going on right before the virus shutdown thing. So is there anything to do with the Mercury retrograde coming, the Venus retrograde, the timing with all these positive things that are happening? But of course, we know that there's also the opposing forces that are going to try to squash it. Because I personally believe that these deep state cabal, whoever you want to call them, they'll rather watch America burn to the ground. They'll burn it to the ground themselves before they'll concede defeat. So we have to keep that in mind at all times. And remember, the media is where people get their information. They don't go read the actual documents and listen to the statements. They get their information from Twitter, from the media, and then that just inflames all their emotions. And then here we are burning down the city.
Yeah, I mean, this whole year is difficult astrologically. Astrologers have been looking at this year for, for the last couple of decades because it's so significant. There's so much going on. But yeah, in terms of what you say about the deep state, I would watch out for those kind of like false flag attacks, especially around September, because that's when we see Mars retrograde. Mars retrograde is a time of literally explosive emotions, but it can also be a lot of violence. So maybe we're seeing a little hint of that now, but they're going to want to do anything to knock Trump off his throne basically now, because so many people love him now, have been converted to. So many people are saying, yeah, I just thought he was full of hot air, but he's done so much. I would be concerned about that for the rest of the year, especially September until the end of the year.
Yeah. Remember, after the lockdown, there's an explosion. I think that's part of Gemini too. Gemini is verbal, communicative, and a little bit also about disagreements. So I would have expected to see this on steroids, disagreements, conflicts in terms of communication and ideas, and just a lot of hot air and bluster. So what he's done, and then a part of that is exacerbated by the lockdown. People want to get out in the streets, even break some windows or whatever, just run madly, because guess what? They've been held down, they've been in lockdown and they can't handle it, right? Climbing the walls. So there's that. Then there is this Mars in the Pisces would have a little bit to do with that, in the sense that it's stirring. Wherever Mars goes, it's like lighting, lots of matches. It's like creating an incendiary environment. Well, in the watery, dark, deep subterranean Pisces, which is often in its negative, about deception and hidden agendas, Mars goes in there to, spark it up and stir it up and all of that. So yeah, I would see people on the deepest, wouldn't call it spiritual level, but the deepest unconscious level being quite angry and being stirred up and not liking, somebody rattling their cages and things like that. Add to that for the retrograde of Venus. Venus is always love and ease and peace and having a good time and luxuries. If it's in retrograde, it means depression, fear, anxiety, not having a good time, feeling more depressed. And we've heard reports about the suicides and everything being up. And again, a general atmosphere of hopelessness and futility, because the planet of love and goodness and prosperity is in retrograde. And these things happen for a reason, to test people, to say, well, the negative side of Venus is all good. Oh, everything should be always good and luxurious and handouts and fun all day long, like, kids in a playing field. Or, if that stops, is to see what happens with you all when the trampoline is put away and daddy says, now, numbers up, come in. Banging the spoon, I don't want to come in. So, think of the general public, who's, you say, even think of politics in frivolous terms, Oprah Winfrey terms. They don't read the documents, don't really care about it. Who was it who said? It was Tony Benn. He said the American public are not interested in politics; they're interested in politicians. In other words, he was talking about the cult, the cult of personality. That's about as far as politics gets for most Americans. Do they read Ann Coulter? Are they reading the work that's out there that's shocking? No, because they want to live in a bubble. And we definitely should talk about that. Isn't Fiona? Isn't Mars soon going into Aries also at some point?
Yeah, it will quite soon, within the next couple of weeks, about 3 weeks' time.
Oh.
It's currently at 11 degrees of Pisces, so it's kind of, still meandering through there. But something else that I've noticed, aside from all of the things that we're experiencing on a global level, a lot of folks are going through some kind of like psychic attack or spiritual attack right now, which I've noticed tends to run alongside these global events. Is that when Trump is getting attacked, or the deep state are really ramping up their attacks against goodness, and a lot of people feel it on an individual level.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, and some of the things, like soon as something happens in Gemini in a big way, it comes to your door. It comes into your very personal life, because it's your personal communications, your neighbors, your immediate community. You see, so when Trump said several times, it's not just federally, we're working on the state level. They said that 3 or 4 times. Whenever you hear somebody in power like that repeat, especially if it's the third time, that's important, right? They're saying that on purpose. They're not just saying it because it came off the top of their head. But the thing is that all the things that he's laid in line with that order affect you right now. He even said that we're going to be soon working on the state level, which means to say people like you and I, just to take out of the air, we could sue now on the local level. We wouldn't even have to go to the federal level. We go to our local lawyers here. The lawyers would just say, away you go, lads. They've got their protection of their liability. No, they goes, walk in, sit down. What do you want? You've lost money because they took down your channels and you lost advertising revenue for all of that. See, now on the state level, your own lawyer can say, yeah, the way's open to upstairs. We can take this to court. What do you think about a James Woods? Again, just picking somebody out of the air, somebody with real money, right? Just picking a name. Who's got a bugbear, who maybe also hated what was going on social media and has the money to back it up, right? The way is now open for them or us or anybody listening to this to take action. So the executive order it's not the waving of a magic wand in that sense. You still have to take whoever it is, the social media within your group, right? Whoever censored you, you can take them to court, but you still have to have the money and the clout and the will to do it. But what has happened now, which is monumental, is that the door to that has been opened. A lawyer will now sit down with you, and say, yeah, now we talk. Whereas before I would just lecture you about going home. There's nothing you can do because they've got this liability shield and so on. These are big things that are happening. And I want to see the man credited for those things. But again, because it's all happening in Gemini, it has a public appeal. Isn't that right, Fiona? The air signs are about more of the public involvement. So whether people like it or not, they are now involved in the political process.
Yeah. Gemini is a very open sign. I mean, Donald Trump is a Gemini. They're not secretive. They're fairly straightforward. So yeah, we're all involved in this, whether we like it or not. And Facebook and other forms of social media are very Gemini areas, because it's all about, quick communication and talking to this person and talking to that person. So I wonder if he's being advised by an astrologer. I'm sure that he is.
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh, that's very likely. I hold by that. I really do.
Yeah.
Now, the rumor on the bigger scale, because this is all fantastic about social media, but in the bigger context of things, it's really not as big as the other announcements we made about China and India and the Hong Kong issue, right? We're going to be very short about this. We won't stretch it out. But yeah, invading Hong Kong is a prelude to war, just in case anybody missed it, because the Japanese are going to say, what the hell do you think you're doing? And they're going to look around for backing. The backing now is India, because Trump has sent out his Steve Bannons and other people to surveil and to get in there as moles, see if China is ready to overthrow its own government, which would be wonderful. Then we'd have an ally there. But if you guys don't make a move to do that, well, then you're going down. So what is happening right now as we speak, I feel, especially based on the astrology, is that he's still giving China, the Chinese people, I mean, a chance right? Because the very next proclamations he's going to make is that we're coming after you, either with very heavy sanctions that the world has never seen being brought to bear on China, and we're on the periphery of that right now. That is imminent. With that, right, with that will come the demand, and this is the big one. This is where India comes into it, just again for people who are not able to work this out. India is important because all those Western businesses that outsource to China, they're hardly going to want to stay there when, the missiles are flying or when the economy is busted. So by Donald Trump strategically and brilliantly going to talk to the Indian Prime Minister, I guess that the gig is, you will now be the new host for all the, and we'll maybe even make it a financially incentive for them to move. And they will move, because who wants to stay in a country that's the target, right, of a lot of places? So there's that to bear in mind. So there's the bigger picture. And now that India has said, yeah, we like Donald and we're going to back America, that's the end of China, folks. China may still do something belligerent because they're psychotic, right? I'm not saying they'll climb down. I hope they do. I hope the Chinese people, cause a coup in their country. That'll all be a lot better. But if these people remain as fossilized as they are, socially and politically, then you can't have any, sympathy for what goes down. There's enough countries around them, right, that are friendly with the West. What's wrong with China? And India is close enough to China as Japan is to look over the wall and see, we don't want to be like that once we were very communistic. But that communistic paradigm has kind of, gone flat in India and places like that. So that's a really good sign. And that will also change the destiny of the world. And some of the constellational things we're seeing are that big, aren't they, Fiona? The movement from the earth signs into the air, Chiron, and even the constellation at the end, the aspects at the end of the year that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. But there's certain indications there that bigger global things, so one doesn't need to just continually focus on something that's happening within within a certain framework, as great as they may be. This thing on social media is incredibly needed, but it sends a ripple effect. And then, as I've always said, since we've been talking about this since March, and as I'll finish on this, is that if Chinese communism is taken down, that is the best thing that can happen. And that's why there's a silver lining even to the lockdown and a lot of other privations we're suffering. Right? I look at the silver lining of that. What I mean by that is this domino effect. If you take out the big dragon, then all the little tentacles of what we would call socialism, wherever it might be infecting in the West, dry up of their own. Right? Is in fact another kind of communism we've spoken about on other programs, the Ismail version, that also dies a death. Right? So there's so when people are in panic and losing their minds, think in terms of the positive. Sometimes it's the sharp shriek method has greater consequences. Will clear up a lot of other diseases. And believe me, socialism is a disease. What's happening when they stood there and did that signing of that document, right? The executive order, they actually mentioned the word communist China right there and then in the Oval Office. That's progress. Just that they're even acknowledging that who the enemy is, which most of the people, a great deal of many people listening to us still don't understand that. And that's why they get confused about what's happening. They see it as completely, loose cannons running around the deck. Well, that's because you forgot that there's an enemy out there and what it's doing to your children and yourself and your economy and your country and the record of your forefathers, the legacy of those people. How could you possibly forget that? But you have. That's why we're in this mess. Screaming about Donald Trump as if it's something at the end of the world. You don't know who the real enemy is? Well, that enemy is, you're living right now in the era where that enemy may be once and for all trounced. Get behind it. And I said, the silver lining that may even explain a lot of the lockdown situation actually. But even if it comes to the point of him declaring martial law in this process of taking them down, and then if they don't react properly or don't concede gracefully, it can not only be war, it could also be, a state of martial law in America. Now, let me just tell you something. He's the commander-in-chief of the army. The statutes that will come with a martial law situation with him and his generals, we're not going to talk about it here, but there's a lot of things that those statutes, when they arrange it and write it down, could affect people being house arrested. This is Obama. This is George Soros. This is Bill Gates. Right? This is what it means. Actually, being enemies of the state. It says in the oath of allegiance that I will protect America from enemies, foreign and domestic, implying that there are domestic enemies. Well, under martial law, those enemies better run. They better find a rock to hide under. So this is all the background anyway that we're talking about, because Mars, the position of Mars soon, the position of Mars right now in Pisces, and various other aspects like that strengthen the government's power of somebody who knows how to use it against evil. So I'm just giving people a wake-up call to realize that many things that happen should be seen in this light. We live in such an affluent times. we get pampered, and then the little bit of shuffling that goes on in society, we lose the rag and committing suicide and all. I mean, what are people made of? Come to Belfast, right, Fiona? Fucking commit suicide? What the hell? Give me a break.
Well, it doesn't help with all the amounts of psychotropic drugs people have been on, the amount of brainwashing they've been under, the destruction of the family units. There's so many things that we can attribute to this mental health uptick, and it's a sad state of affairs. And this is a time for strength, and this is why we've been doing a lot more content to try to empower people, to try to wake people up. We can't turn our head away. This is the time to focus on this stuff and learn about it. And Michael, I wonder if you had some comments. I mean, there's always this conversation, especially within this alternative community, which is, as you say, loaded with a lot of nonsense, just as the mainstream narratives are. But there's this idea that, well, someone would say, well, Michael, you've spent years telling people that it's all about, the individual, and you are the one that can rescue yourself and all this stuff. So why are we now, bowing at the feet of Trump, or why are we now celebrating a politician? Aren't politicians corrupt? Aren't they naturally just evil? And if someone like Trump were to sign these executive orders and change all the furniture on the deck and go in there and maybe declare even martial law or get into these things, but what, are we not siding with the enemy now? Like, why are we changing camp? This is the kind of the vibe that I get from people that question me. And I think it's just because, as you said, they haven't kept up. But maybe just a quick answer to that. Like, we're not saying Trump is the one that we just have to worship and hope is going to save us from everything. But I personally, for me, I'm going to celebrate anytime we get some kind of a win where the average person like myself couldn't achieve. You need someone in a powerful position to have, at the very least, if you could say anything, it's to bring the attention of the public to these important matters. The fact that this discussion is happening and executive orders are being signed about these social media companies are going to keep that ball rolling in people's minds that, man, there's something going on with the social media companies. So I find it's valuable. What do you think about that, Michael?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with Donald Trump. I haven't found anything bad yet. So if it's a genuine criticism based on some actual facts, but all their criticisms are bogus. I just addressed this fact that in this movement, people who've already lost their websites, had their social media accounts closed, still don't back the man even after this day. That's all you need to know. Ungenerousness, right? That is slimy. That is low. In normal life, when somebody throws you a coin or does you something better, or says, "I put a good word. I could put a good word in for you, in your promotion." Don't you go over and buy that person a card? Don't you shake their hand? Don't you buy them a nice bottle of whiskey or something like that? The ungenerousness in this movement is one of the things that's put me off. And we won't even go into the names because I hope that people listening to this know who we're talking about. And they're card-carrying socialists, right? There are many other answers to that. But the thing is that when the news people it's happening now as well, they're constantly going to people who have no real actual power. You see, a lot of these governors, mayors, and a lot of the people in the Congress, just because people are inside government, doesn't mean they actually wield any physical power. Bill Gates doesn't actually wield any power outside his own company and his own head, right? The president has the fucking power, right? So let's just make it real easy. Just because you happen to be in government, right, doesn't mean you have any power. This Leviathan frightens us, right? But the president does. So when you compare, so the real answer to this is this. The people who would say, like you're speaking, I can already tell you, David, know nothing about American politics. That's why they can do this. They don't know about Wilson. They don't know about FDR. They don't know about the Kennedys. They don't know about Reagan, Nixon, Eisenhower, right? All the way up to the flunkies of Clinton and Bush's, right? Amazed they didn't come in threes.
And Obama.
Donald Trump is, that's a whole conversation. But yes, exactly. Now, Donald Trump is about as far away in his own personality and in his politics as those people could ever be. If you go track back to the 80s when he was speaking, he's exactly consistent as he was today. But the thing that really matters to answer that question is that he's better than them. Just focus on that word, better than them, in many, many, many ways. He's a businessman, not a politician. That smells good to me already. So he knows how to work on the economic level, like we kind of hinted earlier. Doesn't need to really have boots on the ground or do things in this low grade way. He's not Obama, right? Doesn't make a lot of promises and then doesn't come through. He works on a much higher level, knowing this law that I spoke of, that when you take out the poison in the blood, a lot of other organs get well. When you go to the heart of the cancer. That already shows me great intelligence, strategical thinking, and what I know about Geminis, And Virgos and people with a lot of Mercury, that's usually the way they work. So I'm satisfied there. So that's basically the superficial answer. There's so much more to go into, though, when you get into the deeper politics. We don't want to do that here. But obviously, a lot of people talking, including people in government, don't know anything about American history or American politics. You know what I mean? And so
let alone
that's
those
why
journalists,
they talk like this.
Let alone the journalists you were bringing up,
my God.
who are giving you all the information about this and clipping things up and framing it in certain ways. Like even this ridiculous thing they did with the tweet that apparently they're calling it the tweet that lit America on fire. And it's like, no, the media lit America on fire and fueled racial tensions and framed it in a specific way so that people get that information subconsciously. And don't forget, those seeds were planted 4 years ago or 3 years ago when he was elected. So now it's coming up and it's waking that feeling up that it's like, Trump was talking about putting the military on the ground so that they can, when the looting happens, then the shooting can happen. So he means he wants to shoot all the Americans. That's how people actually interpret it, right? So what do you think about that tweet?
That's the most modern, that's the most modern iteration of ungenerous people who purposely have been brought up on false news and basically eat it up. They're telling him he's a brute. He's Frank Nitti. It's a St. Valentine's Day massacre. He said, we will respond to the violence. But I guess people running muck in the streets isn't violence. But it's only when the president says we got to do something about it, might send in the National Guard. Vlad the Impaler is loose. You see, but the rational person sees, no, that's a response to violence. But here's the thing, right? There isn't it true that there's a lot of planets retrograde now? Right now, let's take one. Mercury retrograde coming up. What is your interpretation, of retrogrades? Pertaining to things like Venus and Mercury in general. What is retrograde? How do you see that, Fiona?
When a planet is in retrograde, it's a time when there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. So on an individual level, things tend to slow down in the external world, giving us the chance to process and reevaluate certain themes in our lives. But yeah, there are quite a lot of planets retrograde, and then of course later on in the year we're going to have Mars, another Mercury retrograde. So this year is all about review. Retrogrades are very karmic, so it's a time when people reap what they sow. And I think that we are starting to see that with the takedown of the deep state and all of their shills, because so many people are turning against them and their eyes are being opened up. But yeah, by the end of the year, just expect even more of this stuff to come out. And then, of course, Jupiter goes into Pisces. That's not going to be until 2021. But, the Pisces is the sign of like illusions and, deception and stuff like that. But I am expecting news of grand, big deceptions becoming public knowledge. So that's about a year and a half away.
And the Chiron position in Aries would also bring that out. It would be more orientated towards exposing deceptions, right? Big and small.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And uprisings and rebellions.
That's right. Yeah. And also the Saturn coming into Aquarius. Aquarius is normally quite scattered. It's all these subcultures. It's all this political breakaway, fringe, crazy stuff. By Saturn coming there, it can also be kind of good, in which people start to realize that they've had all of this socialism and the narrative is indeed thin. I talked about that on India's level, but it can also be, it's like the whole law of opposites. You go too far to the other extreme and suddenly it flips back. There's been so much of Uranian energy in the bad way, right? And this includes social media, but it includes all sorts of bizarre ideas and fake ideas that jump up and get trendy for a while and then fall away. When Saturn comes in, it can be a good thing. I never would have said this myself a few years ago because, I had a different idea. But now, actually, it can be like, Saturn brings a kind of stability, a kind of old world sensibility, right? A little bit of order and a lot of bit of process, and people crying out for a little bit more conservative, values. You may not see it in Sweden or some lost soul place like that, but in an American context, which was only a few hundred years old, it could be that there's a rise of the conservative mentality, even amongst people that are the millennials or whatever, right? Might not that be the case?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And that's something that I said actually at the start of Saturn's journey through Capricorn, because Capricorn is all about conservatism and, traditional values. And I I said that I thought that I would see a return to that. So with Saturn going into Aquarius, it's kind of, first of all, strengthening boundaries. So we should probably expect to see stronger border control, I would say, in the West,
Oh yeah,
and
great.
less of the SJW thing and all of those
Right.
tiresome people. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that we need Saturn. We need Saturn in
Structure.
our world. Yeah.
Yeah, like structures and boundaries, definitely, and also in people's individual lives. And then one thing about retrogrades is that yes, it does send you back. A Mercury retrograde will say you didn't cover this before, or you let it slide before, or it was shoddily done before, and you know it. You kind of always half know it, but you forgot. You just left it there. And some of that can be benign. It can be as just benign as painting the house, or buying some better equipment or whatever. But it can also be a lot deeper, depending on the person's violation of the law of order and attentiveness and precision, isn't it? And if people have really let things slide, then it tends to be that Mercury retrograde hits them harder, and there's a lot of losses, and a lot of stresses and difficulties, and all of that, right? Because they haven't been keeping things up to date or in order or whatever. They haven't been really doing their homework. Then, of course, these retrogrades can be. I think that's why there's a rise in the suicides and all. With Venus retrograde, again, it's people who haven't been really. Maybe they've been playing too much hooky. They've been relying on the conveyor belts of pleasure and sensuality, and then a little bit of that removal, and already they're falling apart. Because this is a generation that hasn't experienced World War. They haven't experienced deprivation at all. It's just been one big video game. And so Venus goes retrograde, and everybody starts. But would you think that in relationships, say somebody is in a relationship, Venus retrograde couldn't be that good, could it? I think you did a whole thing on this, right? It sends you back to be more honest, right? It has several positive
Yeah.
effects, though, even in relationship, doesn't it?
It does if you identify the lesson. I mean, if you just throw your hands up and like walk away from your partner, you're not really, well, maybe that is the lesson, but most of the time you need to work on something. You need to work on yourself, or, put more energy into your relationship to nourish it and to nurture it. And when Venus goes retrograde, it kind of highlights those issues, because the romance and the love and the kind of the good times are in the back burner. And it highlights those things that we all need to do to keep a relationship steady and stable. So a lot of people right now have been experiencing relationship issues. A lot of my clients have said that to me. But if you learn the spiritual lesson, your relationship can only grow stronger.
Some relationships are based on just the Venus, the superficiality, the marzipan on the top. If you take that away, it's like, who are we as people underneath the role, right? Wouldn't you say maybe it will strengthen us? Do we like each other as people? Are we really friends, as opposed to just this romantic thing on the top? Also, if a planet is retrograde, here we're talking about Venus, old relationships, ones that you had before, come under review. Some old party contacts you, writes to you, right? Or you find out on the grapevine something's happened to them or whatever. Wouldn't it might throw you back to your first relationship, or second or third, right? It might have to revisit, or you meet that person at the mall again, or the store. Isn't it true that sometimes an old party in a romantic sense
Yes,
might recontact you? Yeah.
that's
Have
very
you heard the
common.
plan?
Yeah, especially the Geminis, because Venus is retrograde in Gemini, so they're all getting these random messages on Facebook from their exes like 10 years ago. But sometimes the lesson is to ask yourself, do I still resonate with this person? Do I want something better than this now? And the best thing that you can do is just not reply.
Yeah, especially if you've had a particular kind of relationship, probably best not to reply. Change address. No, yeah, again, but that's very valuable, isn't it, in a sense, because we do move on a lot, and the retrogrades are, saying counterbalance that a bit with, don't just be turning the page only. There are valuable lessons that may not have been learned at that particular juncture, or things were so hectic that you couldn't at that time for some reason. The retrograde gives you a moment to meditate and contemplate on that, to abstract a message, to abstract a coordinate. That person told me they were going to do really, really well and snub their nose at me. Now I meet them and they're on the fucking streets. Take a coordinate from that. I was beating myself up in guilt because of possibly the way I treated that person. Then I find out, oh my God, it was all a lie, right? They've used that ruse on many other people. You see, so there's definitely a way to break free from a particular syndrome by checking back. I mean, we don't want to get into the whole dynamics of memory, but the idea that memory is for a reason. These retrograde moments are like a kind of a memory, bringing you back a thought, a memory, and you should write them down because they may seem trivial at the time, but they can be very valuable in the bigger context of your chart. These retrograde moments, but certainly people are busy, caught up, frenetically extrovert. These retrogrades will hurt them, right? Because they curtail that or they chop that off or prevent that from happening, and it throws a person back into a little bit of a contemplative aspect, right? And of course, they probably don't like that, But what about breakups? Wouldn't also Venus retrograde often say, okay, this is a perfect time to part? What do you know about charts of marriages or relationships? Could that be a situation as well?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people will break up over Venus retrogrades because when the kind of facade is removed and you're looking at this person, with the rose tinted glasses off, you can see them for who they really are. The last time that Venus was retrograde in Gemini, which was 2012, so many people broke up. There was like a big energetic shift then. And I think that it's something similar is happening now, but for sure you can break up during a Venus retrograde. However, it's not really advisable to do that until it goes direct and you're really sure, because the retrogrades can do strange things to our minds at times. It's all about internal processing. So make sure it's what you really want before you do that.
I agree with that. Like we were saying about looking back at past relationships, even coming across another person, that can be a lot of illusion, right? Say it's not a physical person, just you thinking about it. You can over romanticize that period. You can completely misconstrue it, isn't it? Something that happened 10, 12 years ago, and you're thinking, oh, that was much better than the thing I have now. How the hell do you know, right? I mean, do you really know that as a fact? And don't act on it until things go straight again. Make a note of it, what passed through your mind, and then revisit it again when it goes straight. Because you might find, what was I thinking? I was caught up in something really weird there. That thing was nowhere near as good as what I've got right now, So yeah, I agree totally wholeheartedly with that. Yeah. No, that's really, really good. Because this is a very unusual year, and those planets that move from the Earth signs into the, if nobody believed in astrology, that one hasn't happened since the 1800s. So that's it perfectly fits what's going on. The movement of Chiron is very, very new. The entrance of Pluto out of Capricorn into, the following sign of Aquarius is also huge, right? These are very quite large movements, and there's others to come. Like you said, there's a Mercury retrograde coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting into eclipse season as well.
Really?
Just to make everything even more crazy, we've got a Mercury retrograde.
Right.
Yeah, on the solstice, and a couple of eclipses.
Is that right? Yeah. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, the moon is very, very important in all of this. Yeah, it's great to just see what the president has done, and people need to credit him for that, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe just quickly we can get some comments on this other. I feel like this is one of the biggest things ever. First of all, going after the social media companies for censorship. I don't care if it's Barney the dinosaur that did it. It's happening, and I'm happy about it. And this other announcement of Trump terminating. He threatened it. He threatened that this was going to happen with the World Health Organization. He sent them a very strong letter to say, change your ways, have transparency, admit basically that you've been shaking hands with our enemies and that you've been lying to the public, and they didn't turn around. So he said, all right, I'm terminating the relationship permanently with the World Health Organization. And, what people need to remember, because somebody said, well, shouldn't he be doing something about like Bill Gates and Rockefeller Foundation and Soros? And I'm like, well, hold on. When you're using strategy, you got to take out the right supporting pillars if you want something to fall down. You don't just go for the big obvious targets. So think about it. When America was funding the World Health Organization, they were the number one funder by far. I think it was $535 million a year or something they were sending them. And then right underneath that was the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So when Trump pulled the funding, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation became the top funder of the World Health Organization. And so now that he's completely terminating ties and exposing what's been going on to the people in the media, then that does end up taking that out and putting that entire situation back into a different perspective for people. And it allows each and every one of us to digest what has just happened. So anybody, either of you have any thoughts about this massive turn of events of him taking money out of the UN, taking money out of the World Health Organization, terminating relationships, declaring things against, there's the whole Obamagate thing. We haven't even he's announcing publicly that the Obama administration was the most corrupt administration in American history. A lot of people are like, what are you talking about? Then he's doing the trials. He's got Fauci on the hot coals right now. All these things are happening. Do you have any thoughts on that? Maybe Fiona, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, this is all, Pluto is coming to its journey, the end of its journey in Capricorn, which is all about restructuring and rebalancing of power. It is another couple of years before it enters Aquarius, but we should expect to see more of this. This is quite typical. Also, the chart of China is, just to touch on something that Michael said earlier about the sanctions, there's something really huge that's going to affect that country at the end of the year, because Saturn will conjunct its moon and the rising sign, which shows a very strong ending to their way of life. So I feel bad for the citizens, but hopefully, hopefully we see an end to the power that China currently has globally.
And when this happens, when this comes down, another credit to Trump, because he will never move in belligerently, like a tyrant, like you spoke of, that people are thinking. He will give them fair warning. So watch for that. The man who gives them fair warning is a hero. The man who doesn't is a despot. But I already can tell you that Donald Trump will give them ample time. That's the difference between him and an Obama or a Bush, right? He doesn't sit on the Carlyle group. Remember that? Remember Halliburton? Remember the kind of people you voted in?
Mm.
The American people. What the hell? And we said that this is a man who is shattering illusions. But you're quite right. I think that he has seen who the enemy is, right? And he's going after them. But he's going after them in this way in which he doesn't really need the average person's support on the ground level. He's doing it strategically, and he's using the power of government in the right way. And as I've said, my answer is just simply, I can't find anything he's done wrong. So how can I fault the guy? In fact, if anything, he's not moving fast enough. If I was an advisor of shit, he'd be moving a lot faster. But then, as I say, that's my nature. But he is doing what he needs to do within the power of government. And what he's helping do is people who follow him are reframing, right? And reframing in real positive ways. The way he's working is he's showing that these AOCs don't have any power and are not a threat. These snowflakes smashing windows and running in the street, I don't bother with them. They're chickens, right? He's giving you some structure back and some strength to realize that what you thought was big, giant, shadows on the wall are really absolutely imbecilic. I've been saying it for years, except I've said if you get your articulation down and your facts down, there's none of these people you can't take out. In fact, I've even added, you bloody well should. I'm not going to tolerate that you could be defeated by that. One of these creatures, right? For goodness sake, it's not that hard, right? It really isn't that hard. A lot of it is just garnering true facts about stats and things like that, and maybe a little bit of added, political sophistication on top of that. But all said and done, it's not that hard. So the fact that we've capitulated to people like Trudeau and come on, it's a small potato. So Donald Trump has helped ramp us up. There's more people interested in politics than ever. There's more people voting on things than ever. There's more people paying attention to the political debates than ever. That's all very, very good. So when you asked earlier on about, Michael, didn't you say this and that about politics before? Yeah, that's before Donald Trump got elected. I was praying that he would, and he did. So the thing is that has changed a lot of my perspectives, because as I say, they're not contradictions, they're variations based on the fact that the world changes around you. My God, you have to be fluid. Who would live in the modern age of 21st century in which things are just changing in minutes? Look what this president's done just in a matter of days that presidents couldn't do if they were there for years. So, of course, you keep it flexible and you allow yourself, to change orientation, because reality and life in general, especially now, is a very variable thing. And to stay with it means a lot of jettisoning, and astrology proves this. This Pluto definitely does. Pluto works on the deepest sort of soil level to say this is radioactive. The trouble, you guys have only gone with certain levels, Pluto says you have to dig down to the very root of this thing and uproot that. And when you've uprooted that, then the poison gets cleared, and now you build again brick by brick. In effect, Donald Trump, and certainly in my system, it makes a lot of sense. That's what's happening. But the uprooting, of course, is like shining that light in people's face. They don't want to be having to do that because they think that structure is strong. It's like looking at a tent on the horizon and it looks like made of shining metal, and you go over and it's fucking tinfoil, right? A gnat could fly through it. Well, that's what socialism is. It has this big effect on people, because you have to be half mad to be in it in the first place. But the thing is that it does have that, window dressing. It does have that, we're humanitarians and we're not fascists. And so people go, well, neither am I. Yeah, where's the red flag? Where's my Che Guevara t-shirt, right? It has this impact on the campus. But when you probe it and you look around it, it's rotten. And India is discovering this, and other countries are. It's up to China now. This is not to do with any Western threat of China. It's an internal meltdown, an exit strategy of communists within the country, who've held that country like a parasite or a fucking tapeworm, right? Has infected a body. China is infected. When communism goes to a country, it's a poison in the blood.
Right? America's been infected with it.
Socialism, right? Which is a creeping death. To all intents and purposes, it doesn't look like communism. Anybody, as I say, you probe it and you find out what pus comes out. Right? It's Marcusean Marxism, not Marx's Marxism, but the two are just as bad as each other. So they're monstrous, right? So China is now, in astrological terms, getting a chance to renovate. And you said probably towards the end of the year, this is the way I think it is. It's not about anybody wanting to attack them. They've already attacked Hong Kong. That should be war. If Donald Trump was a tyrant that they think everyone's calling him, we'd be at war right now over that. Japan will be mobilized. Other Western-friendly countries, South Korea, non-communist Korea would be already, saying, yeah, help us. We want to get rid of these monsters on our shores. So we'd already be at war right now. But the man is going to do it in a different way. That already shows you sophistication and proves it. You've got to get behind a guy like that. And I'm not going to listen to any half-baked, totally incendiary. And this movement is filled with it, which tells you they've been infiltrated. It's happened to better places. There's precedents for that. These communists don't sit quiet. KGB is made almost 3/4 of the posts on Facebook, folks, are made in Moscow. Right? Compute that. This is called propaganda. They've done it for centuries. They're experts at it. Right? And Facebook is KGB International. Go figure. So don't just believe everything that's on it. Even though it looks like it's physically looking in America, there's so much people need to learn because they've forgotten who the enemy is. Now, Donald Trump is a man who's not forgotten who the enemy is. And he's training and he's getting rid of all the people in government you see around him. In his own way, he flushes them out, and that's good. And he brings in people who are stalwart, old school, more conservative, perfect. Because you need that team around you when you step out into the world. And so my main thing is it doesn't matter what the press say, it doesn't matter what the world says. Government actually does have the power. And so there are exceptions to tyrannous government. There are exceptions to every rule. So even though, yes, in the broad strokes, we sit down, we debate whether even government as an institution is necessary. What are the alternatives? Who said what? That's all great in peacetime. But when an instance like this comes where the whole pivot of the world history can change for the better, then you niggling around and puttering about and making all sorts of negative criticisms. You got Forbes magazine, Newsweek, The Guardian, all printing false news. And you've got a man who calls them out on it. The highest echelons in the land in the press are lying every day. I saw another lie the other day, let alone Twitter and all this nonsense. They're not even important, and yet they breed it. They're only important because they command a lot of attention. But you've now got something else. You've got a man who's finally addressing it. You said it in the beginning, and that's the thing. And that is enough to give people hope, because it's a small thing in the beginning, but it can have huge, huge consequences down the line, And just again, the last thing to say on it, socialism as a paradigm, as a narrative, has always been threadbare, and therefore it has an end by date. And that end by date has come. It's only the twittiest, psychologically, mutilated people. And they could be with PhDs, we're not denying that. But nevertheless, on a psychological level, they're small potato people. They're the little people that Reich talked about. They buy it because they're not heroic. And if you're a heroic person, you like capitalism. And capitalism will always win. No matter how many fights it takes, no matter how many years it takes, the truth will always hold against all of the worm tongues and everything else. So just realize that now that's what everybody individually has to listen to. Everyone on the left should listen to this. The paradigm is busted, mate. It's melting. It's just turning to gray goo all around you. So think about making it. I'm not demanding it. I'm not ramming it down your throat, but I'm saying revisit your enemy, this is a perfect time astrologically to look back at what you thought was so hideous and do an experiment. Try to find something in it that you can relate with. And don't just throw it out in the trash because your buddies or your town or New York, you live in New York, or, whatever you're saluting, whatever crap you were taught in school. Use your own mind and your intelligence, your own reason and your own gumption, and pick up the thing that you think is so loathsome and you really study it honestly, and then come back rationally and say, here's the things I don't like, but here's the things that are. But don't be following these AOCs and Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyns and all the other twats that follow this bankrupt, filthy, murderous, multi-murderous, horrible thing that if you believe in it today, you're going over the cliff, because it has burned out as a paradigm, and the inside know it. China's upstairs know it, but they already know it, but unfortunately they've lived with it for too long that it's poisoned their being completely and made them totally armored and psychotic, so they can't change. So I don't look to change that, but I do look to change in the more moderate people of China who said, the West is coming after us, we've got to do something, this is not right. Let's show some gumption here and throw over our government from inside. But the one way or another is, if they don't decide that, the fate will. And the stars are proving that. Fiona is perfectly right. There's stuff coming for China that down the line, they're getting their chance. After it's over, don't say they didn't have a chance. And don't let them come and go, oh, we never liked it, we were under the gun and couldn't do anything, which a lot of these duplicitous types do after the fact. We were never in communist. Quick, throw my T-shirt away under the carpet. They're all coming in. Don't believe them later on after we've won and they've lost. Don't fall for that old one, right? No, they're given their chance. The chance is already, and just like you said with the World Health Organization and other EU groups, he's pulling the rug. How can you not celebrate this man? How dare you be disingenuous and ungenerous for a man who's literally pulling the rug on the United Nations? You all say you want it, or a lot of people do, and then you won't back the man who's doing it. Do you realize what that makes you in political and social terms? Right? It's not very pretty.
Oh, it's true. And you said a couple things that I want to add to, because that's incredible. Number one, when you say capitalism, we're not talking here about crony capitalism and the shit that came out of Jekyll Island with the Federal Reserve System that was set up as it was actually a brand of elite level socialism with the flag of capitalism pasted on top of it. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about freedom. Okay. When you hear that term capitalism, you got to look at the true origin of it, where it came from, where it originated, the track record that it has, and then how it got distorted in the public through the education system, through the media over time by, not capitalists, by people who have the other ideology in their mind. They come from the communistic camps. So if that word triggers you, you need to research it and understand what we mean. We're not talking about when they say capitalism and then they tilt the game and rig it and have interest-bearing debt. That's not capitalism, guys. That's not what it is. So that's not what we're talking about. The other thing, too, I want to say is that when you were mentioning how we would all like to see these things happen faster, let's just think about it for a second. In the 3 years or so, the guy, with what he's accomplished more in the last week than most presidents of all time have accomplished, let alone the last 3 years. And guess what? He did it while running uphill, pushing a giant boulder. That was the deep state trying to derail him. He's the most investigated public official of all time. He has been through one impeachment trial and all kinds of scurrilous stuff going on with the media after another, all kinds of events blown out of proportion, numerous assassination attempts. Okay, so yep, and in his spare time, he's flipping the bird to the top globalist cartels that have been responsible for some of the most monstrous evil that you can possibly imagine. Okay, so you got to take the win. And the other thing I would say is that we have to remember, there's especially when you talk to these anarchist types, who, I think there's even friends of mine who come from an anarchistic view that side with us on a lot of things. But they've got this blockage in a lot of times where they think, well, we can just jump to what Percy Shelley's world was right now. And you go, well, no, look at the burning in the streets. Look at the fact that people are still throwing their feces at each other. Look at the fact that people have been mind controlled and brainwashed and socially conditioned for decades and generations. Are you going to say, let's just flip the switch, blow the whole thing up, get rid of all forms of control, government, law, and order, and expect the world to survive that? You can't just go from A to Z. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and you've got to take it step by step. And though Trump's not perfect, and no politician is, and I don't advocate for anybody to invest their entire personal power into bowing at the feet of anybody. I believe in the fact that we should wake up internally. You have to remember that the world still needs leaders and guides to inspire them to wake up. So that's how you can take the Trump thing. If you don't, you love him, hate him, don't you forget about his personality. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the actions that are made here, the policies that are put in place. Okay. And you go, people need leaders. That's just the way it is. Like when I started my dojo, I didn't just open it up and go, hey guys, welcome to my dojo commune where everybody's equal and everybody has a say and everybody has a valuable point of view and we're all going to learn from each other. Sounds really good, doesn't it? How much real martial art progress are we going to make if there's too many chiefs in the room? You need someone to take command. You need someone to be the leader. You need someone to be the example that has expertise, competency, integrity, and internal strength. You need that person to not become a dictator for people, but to be a guide and a leader to inspire that in them. That's what a leader does. And why do you think Trump is inspiring people all over the world? And for those people that are like, oh, he's creating racial divisions. No, there's record amounts of Hispanic and Black American and people from all over the world. India, China, people in China, they're holding up Trump banners because he symbolizes something. At the very least, he's an archetype in the social consciousness that represents the masculine hero that doesn't give a shit and comes in with guns blazing in a world of vipers, in a den of vipers, like Washington said. So you need that to inspire change in you. The man can't move the mountains by himself. And that's not what we're saying. We're saying it's a relevant archetype in the time, based on the conditions that we're in, that is going to inspire change in everybody. Everybody's going to have their opinions, but we need that. And I just think it's coincidental that right as those awakenings were happening, we got hit with the next phase of, okay, we're going to put the whole lockdown on hold for a second and we're going to stimulate the racial tensions again. And you go, do you not see that we're getting closer and closer every single day to November's election? And do you not see the temperature rising coincidentally as that's happening? And you think all these events are just disconnected and coincidental? Yeah. Man, I've got a farm to sell you.
Well, those communists spoke about the long march through the institutions, with the emphasis on the word long. So if they can do it to undermine our world, so we have to then realize it's also a lengthy march, a process of time to move through. But unfortunately, communism is not just a political ideology. It's a pestilence psychologically, because it works on the unheroic type of mindset. And so they're going to absolutely loathe, you see, male and pale, get them out, right? Yeah, and that'll only be healed through time. What is his actual date of birth, Fiona? In June?
Oh, sorry. Hold on a sec, Fiona. There you go. Try it again. There you go.
For June 14th.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God.
The number, yeah, 14. June 14th, yeah. So his chart, his birth chart, right? Have you looked at that? I think you have, right?
Yeah.
It does look, he would be a successful man. He would have the wherewithal to become who he is. He's not doing it disingenuously. Yeah. He's earned it, right?
He has, yeah. It was his karmic goal in this lifetime to become who he is. A world leader. He's got Leo rising at the anaretic degree. The 29th degree of each sign is really potent, really karmic. It means the end of a cycle. So he's fulfilling his destiny and helping us all along the way.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
And he has a nice Sagittarius moon, which just he speaks the truth. All of those other...
Oh, no, go ahead.
All of the other charts that I've looked at of the Dems, Joe Biden, Bill Gates, Justin Trudeau, Hillary Clinton, they're all so similar. And it's all this secrecy and, power and manipulation. But Donald Trump, he's right out in the open about everything. He has no filter at times, but that's what we need. We don't want a filter anymore. We want reality and the truth instead of all of this madness.
We need a thick skin. Enough of this pussyfooting around, man. Yeah. I'm sorry. I've just had it. It's going to destroy the entire world if we keep that up. We need to be strong right now, and you need strong people to inspire strength in you.
Well, this censorship is good in one thing, because as I said before, many, many people who are anti-Trump fell foul of the social media blackouts. Count how many people credit. And so to clean up that swamp, right? really does take strategy. It doesn't just take flexing muscles, in the world wrestling approach, whatever it's called. It takes real insight. Sherlock Holmes likes strategy. It's something that's done more in a laboratory than in a government office. And this is marvelous to watch. It's the real master, like as you say, an Aikido master, right? Taking their own power, they're rushing headlong at you, right? And it's just like, down you go. It's that. And that's beautiful to watch. It's a kind of a Zen thing in a way. And this president is not like these other ones in any shape or form. So the ungenerous critics, especially in our movement, it's really pernicious that that's happening. People who claim he's some hidden right, Yeah, right, the hidden right. Look, people like us, like you just correctly said about the kind of capitalism, right? It's a very, very different entity than what people think you're saying. Well, it's the same thing. All through our work, you'll find critiques of that elite. I don't believe in a 1%. That's a meaningless phrase. The business owners who are the ones who really make the money, the one who sit on the boards, who bought and owned the company, yes, they are as guilty as any external, right? Like outsourcing or whatever. Anything that you can think is an impediment from the outside dwarfs when you come to these internal super rich guys who, just to save a few bucks, cut out the jobs of their own people to let even illegal immigrants come in and take those jobs, right? So young Americans who wanted to go through college and pay the way, they can't get a job at McDonald's, or they can't get a job, as a landscape gardener or some of the lower paid things, right? Because they're just welter of immigrants in there taking it and all of that. And that was permitted since the 80s, right? And nobody turned a hair against it. And that is not because of anybody except very, very powerful people. If you step up a bit to the corporate level, they wanted to save, because the bottom line of every investor is to save, right? And to make more money. So for a matter of mere 20%, sometimes even less, they didn't want, because as you know, budget of wages, right, is one of the biggest liabilities in a business, right? And they want to cut that down. But they cut it down at the expense of the entire country. Those cease to be capitalists, David, as you rightly said. And this has been pointed out since the 70s by people, that I feature, like Sir James Goldsmith. And these men were shouted down and completely vilified. And all they were saying was the simple thing that I said, that your internal enemy is the wrong kind of capitalism. It thinks it because it's going to save 20%, right, on paying workers. Goes and ousts their own sons and daughters. The sons and daughters of their neighbors are now ousted from fairly decent jobs, at least starting jobs, right? And you're putting in people who'll cut down that area of your budget and your profit. And you don't know that by doing that, you've undermined the entire capitalistic system of the country. Then how do you call yourself a capitalist? How do you sleep at night? Well, Donald Trump is the kind of guy going, I'm going to fix that in the sophisticated way that I just mentioned. Because I know ways of, taking the same kind of mentality, the same kind of super rich, and dealing with them too. You know why? Because I'm one of them. I'm the super rich. And I know how they work. I know how they think. And there's ways of getting them to change their spots and rehire American people. They're dropping all of these budgets that you said to the UN and to the World Health Organization. Many other brings trillions of dollars back, billions, let's say, to the homeland. The outsourcing of the companies to China, to an India, which is more favorable and Western friendly and it won't play dirty with us, is also going to help profits. Even if the phenomena of outsourcing still actually remains, sadly, but at least put it in a country which is more available and has more simpatico with us. And on and on and on he can do these things to roll back all of this crony capitalism and corporate socialism is what it really is, right? That your Thomas Sowells and others have clearly exposed. People far greater intellect than me have spoken on it. So yes, there are external enemies of communism, this and that and the other, but there's also an internal plague of people who got fat and rich, and that's fine, I'm not against being rich and having things, but then became socialistic in their thinking without even probably knowing it. Because if you are undermining the capitalistic base of your country, which has long existed before you, you're only a millionaire because your dad was one, right? And he only became one because he was in the railroads, or he was the capitalist society made him what he is, that you can now sit on your yacht in some, in the Bahamas or whatever,
without doing that
already
work.
Compromised, without even doing that work, and compromised it with a lot of blow-ins and decent people who wanted an education. See, look, why I'm going into all of this is this: the people who needed those jobs are the next Einsteins, the next Edisons, the next, people who invent and produce, because they're Anglo-Saxon, they're Western. by denying them those jobs to see themselves through college or school, even if they were married or not married, by denying that young set those basic benefits that their country was meant to offer, do you know what you're losing in terms of intellect? So every one of those jobs, from flipping burgers to whatever, the lower level stuff, I don't know the word for it, but the lower level blue collar stuff, right? By not traditionally giving that to Europeans is the end of the world. It's the end of civilization. That's why I'm not going into this because I've been, fascinated by American politics. I'm amazed at what civilization is doing to itself.
Right. And there's so many elements to bring into this whole thing, but I think the main points, and I think we've really addressed it in terms of the timing and everything else. And Fiona, feel free if there's any other elements you want to bring in here. But just the fact that we live in this time where more people than ever, because of this lockdown, like I agree with you, Fiona, because of this lockdown, as much as we can get into the origin of it, who started it, what's really going on behind the scenes, what the other agenda is, that whole thing has been co-opted. And it's been co-opted by, yes, political people and people in the behind the scenes, but also by us, by people that said, hey guys, use this time to strengthen your mind, get out some of those books, start researching this. You're at home anyways, use it as a time to connect to your family, get back in the garden, connect to nature, learn about yourself. This is the time to armor yourself up for what's coming next. All right. And I think that's a key thing. And so people are waking up to that, and more attention than ever before is on these issues. So we don't all have to agree on the issues necessarily, but thank God we're actually talking about it. And I'm not afraid of debate. I'm not afraid of discussion. I'm not afraid of alternative opinions to mine, but we have to keep the conversation going without lighting the place on fire. If we could do that, then maybe we can make a little bit of progress internally and in our society, and prove that we can run our lives and our society without having these big leaders and governments. But I think we're far from that yet. I think it's a step-by-step process, and we have to really, really define the terms. And Michael, when you were saying that about capitalism, all people need to do is go read Dr. Carol Quigley's Tragedy and Hope, where he admits to you exactly what the plot was to create a blend between communism and what he called super capitalism as the new world economic model. And that, you read the Brzezinskis and the Soroses who are saying China is the model for the new world order, and they call it that. So when you want to go, well, why is Trump focusing on China? He's not going after the bigwigs. China's the biggest chess piece they have. That's the experimental lab that they've used for thousands of years, these elite oligarchs that everybody knows about. And so when he's taking a few shots at them and saying, hey, here's the corruption. You're murdering your own people. You're screwing over your own people. And then you're bringing that over here. Well, the exposure of that, the discussion that's happening in the mainstream, that's healthy. So we have to put our partisans beside. This really isn't about left or right. This is about what freedom versus tyranny. That's how I look at it at this stage. But on that note, Fiona, let's maybe do some closing comments here. Is there anything that you see in the stars that might be coming down the pike that we haven't talked about?
No, I think we've talked about everything. Mercury goes into its shadow periods in a couple of days on June 1st. It's in the sign of Cancer, so it's a very emotional, possibly triggering transit. So it's a good time for us to work on our emotional triggers and figure out how to separate our emotions from making really important decisions. So that's going to continue until the 12th of July is when it goes direct. So yeah, all of the other, this is going to be the rest of the year is just going to be more of what we've seen, but bring it on. Personally, I'm loving it. I'm loving this.
Absolutely. It's more good than bad if you really know what you're looking at. Michael, what do you think? Closing comments here.
Oh yeah. Just because there's big revolutionary, this is true revolution. And the Saturn and Aquarius and some of the retrogrades are throwing us back to remember, get a vague memory going of the way things used to be. If something worked for hundreds of years and built America up until the 20th and 21st century, what was wrong with it? You see, but the KGB and all of these other groups, they're still going, by the way. And there's a lot of, when I say that, I mean a lot of other organizations as well. We're not discounting all of these other quasi-Masonic organizations. But all of those groups have worked night and day to break your morale. Look up the word morale. and you don't have any of it because it's been systematically chipped away and chipped away and chipped away by all of this false news, and as you said, you rightly include the groups who come after us. There's not enough conspiracy, right? They're telling too much conspiracy. I want more of it because it's not conspiracy, you dumbass Professor Black. It's called deep criticism of our fucking culture. That's why you don't like it. Right? It's called deep criticism by critical people of what's going on around them. Another thing they don't like. Right? So conspiracy theory be damned. There's no theory in it. It's a few people left in the West who know that something's wrong and go out and test it and prod it and find out and go, come, what's this? Right? Brian Garish, the brilliant men that we brought up in that program. Right? And that's why, people say to me, first you say you're going to take him on, then you say you won't take him on. I'm speaking polemically and rhetorically. I wouldn't take that bastard on because he's a lowlife scum that if I sat down with him, I give him too much time and credit. But another man of his ilk, another man of his credentials, who's more open and unbiased, absolutely, why would I not sit down? So get that straight. But when you're speaking polemically, it doesn't mean I'm physically saying I'm ambivalent about whether I'll sit down with the guy or not. See, again, they move the goalpost to the inessential stuff you're talking about, right? But the thing is also that this paradigm is busted. And that we needed somebody to jump up who would, be able to lead us through into a kind of a new age. You rightly said something about the Aquarian age, Fiona. I look at it there very much that way as well. And a lot of the retrograde planets and some of the other stuff to come shows you that there's a chance to look back and restore. It might be the last call that we get to do that. Then there's energy like Mars moving into Aries and the position of Chiron as well. That's new. That's all new, isn't it? That's like breaking new ground. And so there'll be these little bridge points between that, points where you get to stop, look back, and then surge forward. Trump is obviously intent on moving forward. He's not going to waste the few years that he's got. So he's going to move instead of doing it in a jalopy or like a Beetle. He's doing it in a Lamborghini. That's the difference. He's doing it in a high-powered, sophisticated way, where if the thing pulls over into the ditch, he goes, hold on, I'll be right back, jumps out, opens the hood, twitch, back in. Something that nobody else could do. Go, we're on our way again. You're looking at him going, oh my God, this guy knows how to fix jet engines, right? Doesn't that get inspiration? Doesn't he then get, people in foreign countries? Not all of them are communized or totally, thoroughly corrupt. Some of them are actually, admiring the man. But the real thing is that when you see the depth of corruption that exists in America, how corrupt it's become on so many levels, and it's because of this chipping away of very, very dangerous enemies that got into the country in the 40s and probably even before, but they weren't strong. We've had Clint Clisby on. We've done all of these broadcasts already. It's not to be done. It's already done about the infiltration, into America of communism. And we will continue doing things, but we've had some of the greatest minds on Unslaved about this. And it was infiltrated early, but it took them time to build up to get the gist of where things are going. The trouble is that the basic paradigm of Bolshevik hardline communism is dead in the water. And that obscenity in China is the last, dinosaur flopping about, twitching and thrashing about. And it's not that anybody in the West is going after it in any kind of belligerent way, but a certain amount of sternness and strictness and awareness, and you give them plenty of forewarning to say, hey, throw it over. Be heroes yourself to the Chinese people. That's the message the West is sending out. But unfortunately, if they keep on resisting in the next 4 to 6 months, there'll probably be declarations of these sanctions. I expect that even within weeks. And because that is the call. When he brings to bear sanctions on the country, that's the official call from the American government. Time to change, folks. And we're watching you now, day by day, minute by minute. We're watching to see what you do. If you do the right thing, we're with you to help you, send you experts, do whatever needs to be, restore your whole, your whole culture, not the culture, but your economic base or whatever it might be. And if you don't, well, then don't blame us later on for, reacting. So that's where we're at right now. Yep. As Fiona says, we have to wait and see what's going on. But I do think you've got the right man in the saddle. That's my personal belief. And I don't see any reason for this, I believe you should be pessimistic and fatalistic when there's facts on the table. But until that time, until the boat is going down and I'm the last man down, there's always hope. There's always hope, Mr. Frodo. Carry the fuck on. That's the heroic. Oh, by the way, and if they want to try and take us down, we're ready for that as well. Well, we're not cringing in any corners. We're not climbing under any beds. Right? We're shivering in the attic. That's the wrong approach. But too many people in the West have become very, very feminized typologically, and we are up against that. As I say, these are psychological issues more than they are political.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. Well, fantastic job, guys. Great analysis. Thanks for coming on and sharing this, and Fiona for doing up the chart. And we'll probably do some more follow-ups down the road. I'm really excited to see how quickly this takes hold on the social media and the censorship, and whether or not YouTube's going to continue its campaign, or Google, or whoever. We'll see how this unfolds. We're going to stay on this airwave as long as we possibly can. I'm also in talks with people that are trying to put together other alternative platforms in case there is some major crackdowns by the other side of this. But I'm staying positive. I don't think that it's going to go the way a lot of us thought it did. And I'm really encouraged by a lot of these latest actions. So we'll stay tuned, and stay tuned to the show. I've got some fantastic guests lined up this week or next week. So stay tuned here, and we'll catch you next time here on Truth Warrior. Cheers, everybody.